Welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're going through Mark Carney's Value, Building a Better World.
Oh, yeah, this is a great one.
Yeah, and you suggested this one because you're really interested in how value is created. And not just, in a dollars and cents way.
Right.
But how, our values, as people, as a society, how that plays a role.
Exactly.
And I mean, Carney being the former head of the Bank of England and, seeing the 2008 crisis up close.
Yeah.
He must have a pretty unique perspective on all this.
Absolutely. This isn't just some ivory tower theorizing with Carney.
Right.
He can really draw a line from these big economic ideas down to Main Street, how they affect all of us day to day.
And he starts the book with this really vivid description of the Bank of England building itself. Lions guarding treasure, these massive old desks, even a Canaletto painting.
Right.
It all just kind of projects this sense of permanence and stability, right?
It's a powerful image.
Right.
And you almost think he's going to launch into this defense of traditional economic ideas, right?
It's this is how it's always been. This is how it's always going to be.
Exactly.
But then he kind of pulls the rug out.
Yeah, he does.
He points out that even those lions are just statues,
right,
not actual guardians.
That's for show.
And that Canaletto, a copy.
Oh, wow.
So he's using this to kind of challenge our assumptions about value right from the get-go.
Yeah, he's not letting us take anything for granted.
So how does he define value then, if not these traditional markers of it?
Well, he takes us through this whole journey through the history of economic thought.
Okay.
Showing how ideas of value have changed over time. Way back, you've got guys like William Petty, Richard Cantillon, who were all about this objective theory of value, tying value to something tangible, how much land or labor went into making something.
Okay, so if it took a ton of work or resources to produce it, it must be super valuable.
Yeah.
Exactly. But then in the 19th century, you have this group called the marginalists. They come along and they completely flip the script.
Okay.
Thinkers like Jevons and Marshall, they start arguing that value is actually subjective.
Subjective. So, it's all in our heads.
In a way, yeah. They say it's all about the utility you get from something.
Utility meaning, how useful it is?
Yeah, or how much satisfaction you get from it. So, a diamond, it's not inherently valuable just because it's rare. It's valuable because people desire it.
Right.
They're willing to pay a lot for it.
Okay, so now a diamond is valuable because we think it is.
Right.
Not because it took a lot of effort to dig it up.
Exactly. And this whole idea of value being determined by individual preferences that led to this concept of market price being the ultimate measure of value.
Which is pretty much how we think about things today, right? We look at a price tag and go, yep, that's how much it's worth.
Right. But Carney's saying, hold on a second. There's more to it than that.
He reminds us of Adam Smith's argument, that even though markets operate on this principle of self-interest.
Right, everybody looking out for number one?
Yeah, but they only function within a larger social context, right? So for markets to actually work, there has to be some level of public value.
Public value, so some agreement on what matters.
Exactly, some shared understanding of what's important, what's ethical.
Okay, so even Adam Smith, the father of capitalism, is saying there have to be some shared values for the whole system to function.
Absolutely. And that leads us to another big piece of the puzzle trust.
Okay.
Carney makes this really interesting point that most of the money in circulation, it's not actually created by governments.
Wait, seriously. If it's not the government printing money, then who is?
It's banks. It's the private sector through loans and credit.
I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, every time a bank gives out a loan, they're essentially creating new money.
That's kind of wild when you think about it. Our whole financial system is built on something pretty intangible.
And that intangible thing is trust.
Okay.
Carney uses these fascinating historical examples like the Bank of Amsterdam, the free banking era in the U.S., and they all show how when that trust breaks down, the whole system can collapse.
So even though we have digital currencies and all these complex financial instruments, it still comes down to something very basic, believing that our money actually has value.
Right.
Believing that the system works.
Exactly. Money at its core is a social contract.
A promise we make to each other that it's worth something.
Exactly. And Carney argues that this whole idea of trust as the foundation of value, it's even more relevant today.
With cryptocurrency and all that.
Yeah. Well, and as we move towards a world where things like social credit systems, digital identities are becoming more and more important.
So it sounds like Carney is saying we need to think beyond traditional measures like market price and GDP when we talk about value.
Absolutely.
There's this whole other layer of social factors like trust and shared values that are just as important.
They're essential. And he argues that this broader perspective on value is crucial for tackling some of the biggest challenges we face.
Okay.
Things like climate change, income inequality.
Definitely want to hear more about that.
Yeah, but that's a discussion for another time.
Okay, I am definitely intrigued to hear more about that. This has given me a lot to think about already. But before we move on, can you sum up what we've learned about value so far?
Sure. I think the biggest takeaway is that value is not this fixed thing. It evolves, it changes, it's influenced by a whole web of factors.
So it's not just about what something costs or how much someone's willing to pay for it.
Exactly. It's about the social and ethical frameworks that underpin the whole system.
That's a great way to put it.
And understanding those frameworks, that's going to be crucial for understanding the rest of Carney's arguments about building a better world.
All right, well, I'm ready to keep going.
Me too. Let's dive in.
Okay, so we've established that value, it's more than just a price tag, right?
Right.
It's tied to things like trust and social context. But what about the things that don't really have a market price?
That's a really good question.
Like, how do you measure the value of clean air, a stable climate, or even like human life?
Yeah, those are some big questions.
It almost feels wrong to even try and put a number on those things.
I think Carney would agree with you. There's definitely that discomfort. But he also points out that we do it all the time, whether we realize it or not.
Okay, in what way?
Well, he talks about how policymakers often use this concept called the value of a statistical life, or VSL.
VSL?
Yeah, to make decisions about things like safety regulations or healthcare spending.
So they're literally putting a dollar figure on human life. How does that even work?
It's definitely controversial. But basically, it looks at how much people are willing to pay to reduce their risk of dying.
Okay.
Like, say you're willing to spend an extra $100 on a car with better safety features that reduce your chance of dying in an accident. Well, that choice tells us something about how much you value your own life.
So my life is worth whatever I'm willing to spend on better brakes. That seems super oversimplified.
Yeah, it is a simplification. And Carney definitely acknowledges the ethical problems with using VSL. I mean, reducing a human life to a dollar figure.
Right.
It just feels wrong. It doesn't account for all the things that make a life valuable.
Right.
You know, relationships, experiences, contributions to society.
And not everyone can afford those extra safety features.
Exactly. So there are all these equity issues baked into it too.
So how does knowing about this VSL thing change how we think about these policy decisions? Should we just accept it as a necessary evil?
I don't think Carney has an easy answer to that. But he does want us to be aware of the trade-offs that are being made.
Okay.
You know, when we're talking about things like the cost of a new regulation versus the potential lives saved.
Right. Like, at what point does the cost become too high?
Exactly. And those are the really tough choices that governments and societies have to grapple with. And Carney's point is that we need this broader understanding of value to make those choices responsibly.
Okay. So we talked about the challenge of valuing human life. But what about the environment? We hear all the time about the economic costs of climate change, right?
Yeah.
Extreme weather events, rising sea levels.
Yeah.
But those feel like just the tip of the iceberg. How do you even begin to put a price on the loss of biodiversity, the destruction of ecosystems?
Yeah, that's a huge problem with traditional economic models. They tend to focus on these short-term quantifiable costs and benefits.
Right.
But they completely ignore the long-term, often intangible value of things like a healthy planet.
And that short-sightedness, that's what's driving the climate crisis.
That's Carney's argument, yeah.
So are market forces just incapable of solving this problem? Are we doomed?
I don't think Carney would say we're doomed. He does believe that markets can be a force for good.
Okay.
But only if we fundamentally change how we think about value. Well, he points to this growing awareness of the connections between economic prosperity, social well-being, and environmental sustainability.
Okay, so like the whole ESG investing trend.
Exactly. That's a perfect example. Investors are starting to look beyond just profits.
Right.
And consider a company's environmental and social impact.
Okay, so there are some signs of change, but is it happening fast enough?
That's the big question.
And is it even really possible for businesses to prioritize sustainability without sacrificing profits?
Well, Carney thinks it is possible, and he highlights some really interesting examples.
Like,
He talks about companies like Wedgwood, the pottery company, known for its commitment to social responsibility. And then there's Danone, the food corporation.
right.
They've really embraced this stakeholder model that goes beyond just shareholder profits.
So they're proving that you can do good and do well at the same time.
Exactly.
That's encouraging, but it still feels like those are the exceptions, not the rule. How do we make these more responsible business practices more widespread?
Yeah, that's a key question.
And what about the role of government in all of this?
That's crucial, too. Carney argues that government has a vital role to play in shaping a more sustainable and just economy.
Okay, before we get into that, can you just quickly recap what we've learned so far about valuing things beyond their market price?
Sure. I think the main takeaway is that traditional economic models, they often miss the bigger picture.
Right.
They don't fully account for the value of human life, the environment, all these things that are essential for a thriving society.
And we're starting to see how changing social values are actually influencing both market behavior and corporate responsibility.
Exactly.
So it's not just about crunching numbers and calculating costs and benefits.
Right. It's about recognizing that everything is connected.
The economy, society, the environment.
Exactly.
And it sounds like government has a big role to play in making sure those connections are positive and sustainable.
Absolutely. Carney argues that we can't just rely on market forces to solve these complex challenges. We need a more active and purposeful role for government.
Okay.
To ensure that the market actually serves the needs of both people and the planet.
All right. I'm ready to hear more about that. How does Carney see the role of government evolving to meet these challenges?
Well, he starts by kind of tracing the history of the state's involvement in the economy.
Okay.
From its initial focus on protecting citizens from harm to its later role in promoting economic growth.
Right.
And he argues that this evolution needs to continue as we face the unprecedented challenges of the 21st century.
Challenges like climate change and rising inequality.
Exactly. Carney argues that these challenges require a more nuanced and interventionist approach from government.
So it's not just about getting out of the way and letting the market sort things out.
Right. He's saying that government needs to be more proactive in shaping a more sustainable and just economy.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What does that look like in practice? What specific actions does Carney propose?
Well, he lays out a pretty bold vision, but I think we should save that for next time.
Okay, yeah. This is a lot to digest.
It is. He's got a lot of interesting ideas about how to create a more purpose-driven economy where government plays a key role in aligning market forces with societal values.
All right, well, I'm definitely looking forward to hearing more about that next time. Okay, so we've talked about how traditional economics kind of struggles to value things like human life and the environment.
Yeah, it's not really equipped for that.
And how people's values are actually starting to change how businesses behave.
Right. There's a connection there.
But what about government? Where do they fit in? Carney seems to think they have a pretty big role to play.
He definitely does. And it's not just about, regulating markets or providing a safety net. He sees government as having this responsibility to actively shape the economy.
Okay, but how? What does that actually look like?
It's a pretty broad vision, but I think some of the most interesting parts are about those big 21st century challenges.
Okay.
Things like technological unemployment, climate change,
Yeah.
rising inequality.
Right. Those are huge.
And he argues that market forces on their own, they're just not going to cut it.
Yeah, when you've got millions of jobs potentially being automated.
Right.
Or the planet becoming uninhabitable.
Exactly.
It's hard to imagine the invisible hand just magically fixing everything.
And I think Carney's experience with the 2008 crisis really shaped his thinking here.
How so?
Well, he saw firsthand how this unfettered pursuit of profit can lead to disaster.
Yeah.
So he's not anti-market, but he's also not like a market fundamentalist.
Right. So he believes in markets, but with some guardrails.
Exactly. He thinks we need a strong role for government to make sure markets actually serve the common good.
Okay, so let's get specific. What are some of the things Carney actually proposes?
One big area is education and retraining.
Okay.
He says that with technology changing so fast, we need to completely rethink how we approach lifelong learning.
So it's not enough to just get your degree and coast on that for your whole career?
Right. He talks about this idea of quaternary education.
Quaternary education.
Yeah, almost like a second round of higher ed specifically for mid-career retraining.
So people can adapt to the new jobs of the future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Acquire those new skills.
That's a really interesting idea, especially as people are living longer, working longer. Going back to school in your 40s or 50s could become totally normal.
Exactly. And Carney says that government should be involved in making those opportunities available and affordable.
So not just leaving it up to individuals to figure it out on their own.
Right. It takes public investment.
Okay, what else?
He also talks about promoting competition and innovation, especially in the tech sector.
Yeah, we hear a lot about how a few big tech companies have so much power.
It's a concern. And Carney thinks government needs to step in to create a more level playing field.
By doing what?
Fostering competition, preventing these monopolies that can stifle innovation.
Right, and that connects back to his point about trust. If people feel like the system is rigged against them,
Exactly.
that erodes trust.
Right. And that brings us to another big one, income inequality.
Yeah, that feels like it's just getting worse all the time.
And Carney argues that this level of inequality, it's not only unjust, it's actually bad for the economy as a whole.
Yeah, so what's the solution?
He thinks government needs to create a more inclusive economy, one where everyone benefits from growth.
So things like raising the minimum wage, strengthening the social safety net.
Those are all part of it.
Yeah.
He also talks about investing more in public goods, education, healthcare infrastructure, things that benefit everyone.
Okay, so this is all starting to sound like a pretty different economic system.
It is. He's really talking about rethinking the role of government.
Not getting rid of markets.
Right, but making sure they serve society.
It's a pretty bold vision.
It is, but after reading his book, it's a vision that I find really compelling.
Me too. It's definitely given me a lot to think about.
And what's really interesting is that he doesn't just lay out this theory. He gives real-world examples.
Of what?
Of these ideas being put into practice, like social programs in Scandinavia, green investment in China.
So it's not just some utopian dream.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a practical roadmap for a better future.
Well, this has been a really thought-provoking deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I've learned a lot about value and the role of government.
I think that's what's so great about these conversations. It challenges us to think differently.
And to our listener, we hope this deep dive has given you a new understanding of value, too.
It's a complex topic, but it's something we all need to be thinking about.
And remember, this is just the beginning. Carney's book is full of insights, so we encourage you to check it out.
Yeah, keep exploring, keep questioning.
And think about how you can use this knowledge to make a difference.
Because building a better world starts with each of us.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep questioning everything.